We are in the 8th chapter of the book of Matthew today. Um, in this chapter, Matthew gives us an account of 5 miracles that Jesus does and his discussion with a couple of would-be disciples. We'll talk about the healing of the leper, the healing of the centurion's servant, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, the calming of the storm, and the casting out of the demons of the Gadarene demoniac. Now, between the third and fourth of these, he will have an encounter with a couple of would-be disciples, and we'll see what happens with them. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why did Jesus perform these miracles? Did he do this to gather larger crowds to himself? I kind of doubt it, because, as you know, when there are several people who, when he had healed them, he told them, don't tell anybody. Of course, we being human beings, what did they do? Immediately they went out and told people, and then he had to depart into other areas because of too many people coming. Also in John 6:15, we're told that because of his miracles, some of the people came to him and wanted to make him their king. And that's not what he wanted. That was not what the Father sent him for. So he separated and headed into the hills again. I think he had 3 reasons for healing the people. The first was because he wanted to demonstrate that he had compassionate love for all people, especially those who were diseased or tormented. Second is to prove that he was the Messiah. And we know that a number of these miracles fulfilled messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. Bear in mind, though, that Satan can perform miracles as well. And I think he wanted to be careful of that. In fact, the scribes and Pharisees accused Jesus of casting out demons by the prince of demons. So it wasn't just to prove he was the Messiah. The third reason for performing miracles was so that he could reveal saving truths to people. He attracted crowds and then presented them with information that they needed to understand righteousness. Now, the Apostle Paul did very similar things. He performed some miracles, but he did them again to draw people so that he could give them the truth of the gospel. In Capernaum, where we'll see him mostly today, he spent a lot of time in Capernaum, and at least 5 of the miracles that he performed were performed in or around Capernaum. And yet, the people there rejected him. They did not believe. And we learn later in Scripture that they were condemned because of that. So part of his reason for doing the miracles was as a judgment against people. So as we go through these miracles, I want you to keep 3 things in mind. First of all, he wanted people to see what he is. That is, he's compassionate, and especially to the humble. The second thing, he wanted people to recognize who he is. He is the Messiah. And even those who are closest to him, we'll see a little later, still didn't recognize that. But he also wanted humble followers who were ready to follow him in spite of the hardship and whatever it might cost for them. And in that sense, today we are being those disciples of his, because we are here in spite of what could happen to us. Verse 1, Jesus' first miracle in this chapter of Matthew's Gospel was the cleansing of a leper. Now, it was believed at the time that this disease, although different than what we call leprosy today, at the time they believed it was extremely contagious, and the law required a leper to stay at least 12 cubits, that's 18 feet, from anybody. And that's about the distance from that wall to this wall. That was the closest they could get to anybody. And they were required to proclaim, unclean, 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 so that people would know to stay away from them. Thus, they lived a life of an outcast. Not only did they not have fellowship with anybody else, except possibly other lepers, they could have no physical contact. Now, you all know from experience that I'm a hugger. Um, and there's something, I don't know, magical, if you will, about hugging somebody. It expresses something that can't be expressed any other way. Imagine me being forbidden from hugging. I'm crazy enough as it is now, but if I could never hug anybody, I would just completely go out of my mind. That's the life of a leper. Now, the first thing we see about this man is an indication of his faith. He was so sure that Jesus would heal him that he boldly approached Jesus, even though it was illegal. And it says that he knelt before him. Now, that word knelt before him is the Greek word proskuneo. Pros meaning to or toward, and kuneo meaning to kiss. It's a picture of somebody coming to a holy man, bowing before him, kneeling there, and kissing his ring, or something of that nature. This man came to Jesus, giving him total devotion. Now, he wasn't doing this for appearance sake. He wasn't like the Pharisees. He was not a proud worshiper, just the opposite. In fact, he approached the Lord as a humble worshiper, needing something that only Jesus could provide. Is that how we approach God? Do we approach him as a humble worshiper or as a noisy child? No, I'm sorry. Just kidding. Do we often approach God as a humble worshiper? I think sometimes our pride gets in the way of our worship. His words to Jesus served to reinforce the humility. He said, "Lord, if you will, you can make me clean." This is one of those cases where I'm glad that God allowed me to study Greek. There are two words that mean will in Greek. One is boulomai, which means a desire or a want, and the other is thelo, which is similar, but it also includes purpose and active volition. It's frequently translated as determine or decide. So what the leper was really saying is, if you decide to cleanse me, then you can. See, he knew he could, and he knew that he was willing to, but he was asking him, look, if you decide to cleanse me, you can. And so Jesus said, yes, I decided to cleanse you, and he touched the leper. Notice what the text says next. It says, and gradually his leprosy was cleansed. Not. It says, and immediately his leprosy was cleansed. When Jesus heals or cleanses, it happens immediately. It doesn't have to have time to take effect. It happens right away. When Jesus saved us, it didn't take time. It happened right away. And then he said, see that you say nothing to anyone. He wasn't seeking praise. He wasn't wanting fame. He just told the leper, you go to the priest and you offer the offering for cleansing. But what did he do? He went out and told everybody he could. Now notice, even though it was Jesus who performed the cleansing, it was the leper's faith that saved him. He would not have been healed if he had not believed so strongly that he was willing to break the law to worship at the feet of the Messiah. Okay, well, we really don't know where the mountain was where he gave the Sermon on the Mount. We just know that after he came down, he went into Capernaum. Now, Capernaum was his home base, if you will. He did most of his work always coming back to Capernaum. It's on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. And there he met a centurion. Now the word centurion means a Roman officer of a century. We think of century as 100, but the Roman century was 80. So why don't they call it an octa? I don't know. They call it a century, but it was 80 men. And it's interesting to note that not only this centurion, but every centurion that is mentioned in the Gospels and the Acts was a gentleman of the highest character and sense of duty. Centurions were special Roman soldiers. Now, this centurion had a servant at home. Well, actually, the word is pais, which could mean a young child or a male servant. We don't really know for sure which it was, but if he had been talking about his child, he probably would have used the Greek word huios, which means a son. It's a personal word. So we'll assume here that he's talking about his servant. Now, his servant was paralyzed and was said to have been suffering terribly. He said he was grievously tormented. The type of paralysis or palsy that he was experiencing, most people believe it was a type that not only could they not move their muscles, but there was intense pain involved in it. Now, the interesting thing is that the centurion is a man of war. Jesus is a man of peace. The centurion was a Gentile. Jesus was a Jew. There's no indication that the centurion believed he was the Messiah. He may not have even known what a Messiah was. But he believed that Jesus could heal his servant. Also notice that the centurion came to Jesus just like the leper did, in humility, as a humble person. When Jesus offered to go to the centurion's home and heal his servant, he said, "No, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." Now, remember, this was a Roman officer, used to being saluted, used to being treated special, and yet he was coming humbly to the master. Do you think the centurion really believed that Jesus could heal his servant from a distance? Well, of course he did. And Jesus did. Now, upon hearing these words from him, Jesus was amazed. Now, the Greek word is thaumazo, which means to wonder, to marvel, to be struck with admiration and astonishment. Here this Gentile soldier, man of war, believed so completely that Jesus could heal his servant that he said, "Look, just say the word, and my servant will be healed." As a result, the servant was healed. But notice what Jesus said before healing. He said, "I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham." Now, he's not saying this to the centurion, but to those who are following him. "Many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." He said, this centurion and many others, because of their faith, they will be in the kingdom of heaven. But many of you who are descendants of Abraham won't be. He told them that the entrance into the kingdom of heaven will not be dependent upon who their grandparents or great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, on and on, who they are. Just because they're descendants from Abraham doesn't mean they're going to reach heaven. Likewise, there will be a lot of people who claim to be Christians who will not be in heaven with us. Remember what we read in the previous chapter? It said this, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name?' Then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Important for us to know and to proclaim that salvation is by faith and faith alone. You can't earn it. There is nothing you could do to earn your own salvation. You can only receive it. Next thing happened, the Lord went with his disciples into Peter's house, and his mother-in-law was sick. In fact, it said she had a fever. This series of healings includes that of healing Peter's mother-in-law, which occurred on the Sabbath day, immediately following, right after Jesus and disciples returned from a service at the synagogue where Jesus cast out an unclean spirit. We can see that in Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 29. There are two things to notice here. And I struggled with this because as I was looking at these 5 miracles, Connie knows how much I wrestle with this. I thought, Lord, what is it about these 5 miracles that's common, that I can hold on to and say, see, this is what we need to do or how we need to believe? There's nothing common with them. In fact, this one, nobody asked Jesus to heal Peter's mother-in-law. He just noticed that she was sick, and he touched her and healed her. Notice what she did immediately afterwards. She got up and she served them. She could have got up, fallen on her knees before him, and said, "Thank you for healing me. I don't deserve it, but you healed me anyway." She didn't do that. She just got up and got to work. She served him. Now, this is Thanksgiving week. On Thursday, most of us will be meeting with family. Maybe not more than 6 or 8 of them, but most of us will be meeting with family and celebrating Thanksgiving, a day where we set aside to thank God for his many blessings. One of the things that I do that I think kind of annoys my children sometimes, but I do it every year anyway. I go around the table and I say, "Tell me something that you're thankful for." That's something that we all should do this Thursday, is spend some time in prayer thanking God for the blessings that he's given us, for the fact that we have reasonably good health, the fact that we're able to gather together and worship him, the fact that we have a home that we can live in, that we have food on our table, that we have clothing on our backs. There are so many blessings that we just take for granted, and they're all from God. Later that evening, Jesus was thronged by people wanting to be healed and people who were oppressed by demons. Notice that Jesus cast out some of the demons and healed a lot of them who were sick. Is that what it says? No. It says he cast out the demons with a word and healed all who were sick. The implication is that he cast out all of the demons and healed all of those who are sick. Jesus doesn't do things halfway. And Matthew says that as a result of this, he was fulfilling prophecy about the Messiah. In Isaiah 53:4, it says, "Surely he has borne our sicknesses and he carried our pain, yet we esteemed him plagued, smitten by God, and afflicted." Now, although many interpret this as a reference, this Isaiah passage as a reference to what Jesus did on the cross, Matthew makes a point that in fact he was fulfilling that prophecy in healing those people there that day. Now also, some people mistranslate this verse to say he took away our sickness and pain. And they use this verse to justify their belief that Jesus provides bodily healing for all who come to him in faith. It simply cannot be substantiated by Scripture. Ask Johnny Erickson Tada. She had friends tell her the reason you're not healed is you don't have enough faith. And yet, remember what she said? She said, I would not give anything. All the walking that everybody else can do, I would not give it in exchange for the blessed fellowship that I have learned about my God. There's a reason for sickness and pain sometimes. But Jesus was willing to get rid of it for others. Next, in verse 18 through 22, we have a brief interlude to Matthew's account of Jesus' miracles. He focuses now on Jesus' interaction with two different people. First is a scribe. Now, the scribe's job was to make copies of Scripture. But because they were constantly in the Scripture, they also became teachers of the Scripture. So this scribe was a teacher of the law. Perhaps he was impressed with Jesus' teaching style, like others were, that he taught with authority, not like other scribes. Perhaps he was impressed with the large crowds that followed Jesus. If either of these was the case, he was probably being selfish. He wanted that for himself. Notice that he, as a teacher of the law, walked up to Jesus and said, Teacher. See, I think he was trying to endear himself to teacher because he knew he was a teacher as well. But Jesus responded and pointed out to him that the road would be difficult if he followed, and there would be few comforts of life along the way. He said, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. That if you follow me, it's going to be rough. It's going to be kind of a Spartan existence. We won't know from one night to the next where we're going to sleep, how we're going to get our food, but God will provide it. Well, this scribe was used to being treated very special. And he was used to having the comforts of home because scribes were well paid. Well, apparently this scribe did not become a follower of Jesus because no mention of him is made after this. He let material things and comfort get in the way of following Jesus. The second disciple, when asked to be a follower, and now in this section we don't see him asked to be a follower, but in Luke 9:59 we see that Jesus actually asked him to follow him. He wasn't willing to make a sacrifice necessary either. He said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. So what exactly did he mean? Did he mean his father just died and he needed to go bury him? Surely Jesus would let him do that. Well, we know that the custom of the Jews was that a person was to be buried the day they passed away. So if his father had died, he wouldn't be out there with the crowds. He would be off burying his father. So what he must have meant was, my dad's old, he may be about to die, I need to go spend his last few days with him, and when he does die, I'll bury him and get the inheritance, and then I'll follow you. And Jesus said, no. Let the spiritually dead bury their physically dead. Another disciple in one of the other Gospels said, Lord, let me first go back and take care of some things at home. And Jesus finally said, look, whoever takes the plow and then looks back behind him isn't suitable for that task. In other words, if you're going to take on this task, you need to be focused on it and doing it, not worrying about something else behind you. So if we're going to be a disciple of Jesus, we need to not be worried about other things. We need to be focused on being a disciple of Jesus. Verses 23 through 27 talk about his miracle of calming a storm. Now, the Sea of Galilee is about 13 miles long and about 8 miles wide, and it's about 690 feet below sea level. Now, on the north of that is Mount Hermon, which has an elevation of about 9,200 feet at its peak. And to the east are the Golan Heights. I don't know what they were called then, but today they're called the Golan Heights. And they're at about 2,000 feet of elevation. So you can see there's a tremendous elevation difference between the surrounding area and the Sea of Galilee. And as a result, there are large gorges between those high places and the sea, and it was not uncommon for winds to build up and come rushing down those gorges and across the Sea of Galilee, producing great windstorms and a lot of waves. And what was the disciples' first reaction? Suddenly this wind and these waves, and they said, "Lord, save!" They didn't even get the word us out. They just wanted him to save. Now, at least 4 of his disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, were fishermen. Surely they knew that these storms came on suddenly and they stopped just as suddenly, but they were just as afraid as the others. And just as surely, Jesus knew not only that the storm could come, but being omniscient, he knew that the storm would come. So why did Jesus lead his disciples into a fierce storm on the ocean, on the sea? Did you ever stop and think about that? Why did he do it? Perhaps he wanted to teach them something. Or was it to prove that he was the Messiah? Was it to strengthen their faith? What did he call them? He called, in our translation it says, "O ye of little faith," but he really said, "You little faiths." So maybe it was to help strengthen their faith. Or was it to show them that he would take care of them? And what did they say after he miraculously calmed the storm and there was no more wind and no more waves? And they said, "What sort of man is this?" They still didn't recognize who he really was. They didn't yet know that he was really the Messiah, the Son of God. But we will see later in the gospel messages that finally some of them began to believe. And the 5th miracle is that of healing the Gadarene demoniac. Now, if you, like I, have read through the various Gospels, you may have often wondered how come he just talks about the one demoniac, and Mark and Luke talk about 2 demoniacs. And Matthew talks about the Gadarene demoniac. The area of the Gadarenes was around the city of Gadara. But Mark and Luke say he was from the country of the Gerasenes. Now, it's not just a different translation. It's actually 2 different cities. And they were located very close to each other. In fact, there were a number of cities in that area, 10 of them to be sure, that were all located fairly close to each other. It was referred to as the Decapolis because of the 10 cities. But those around Gadara and Gerasa, those were often referred to either as the Gadarenes or the Gerasenes. So it's not uncommon for 2 writers to refer to them differently. Okay, so let's focus on this man. He was demon-possessed, and nobody could pass by that way because of it, and he lived among the tombs. I don't know that I have ever actually seen someone who is possessed by a demon, but I've heard descriptions of it, and it's not pleasant. And they tend to be very powerful. But let's think about this man for a minute. Jesus asked him, the demon, "What is your name?" And they said, "Legion, because we are many." How many are there in a legion of Roman soldiers? Does anybody know without looking at the notes? Okay, anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers in a legion. Now, these demons told Jesus, if you're going to cast us out, cast us into that herd of pigs over there, because they didn't want to be cast into nowhere. Now, how many pigs were there? There were about 2,000. And we see that every one of the pigs rushed down the hill and drowned in the sea. So there had to have been at least 2,000 demons in this man possessing him. I don't think any of us can fully comprehend what that meant. This man was tormented. We can also learn a little bit about the theology of demons from this passage. Remember from James, we heard, he said, "You believe there is one God, the demons also believe and tremble." Okay? What else do the demons know? They recognize Jesus is the Son of God. That's how they address him. Secondly, they know what's going to happen in the end times. That's called the study of eschatology. And they knew all about the end times because they said, "Have you come to torment us before the time?" Because if you read about the end times, you'll know that God is going to take some of those demons and cast them into Tartarus, into Sheol, where they will be tormented. Lastly, we know that these demons pray. Say, what? They talk directly to Jesus, right? Isn't that what prayer is? Talking directly to God? I wonder how many of us pray as much as the demons do. Hopefully all of us pray a lot more than that. So Jesus did finally cast out the demons, and they entered the pigs, and the pigs ran down and jumped in the water and drowned. And this man was healed. And what did he want to do? He said, "Jesus, let me follow you." And for some reason, Jesus said, "No, I don't want you to do it. I have another job for you." So what happened to this man? He became a preacher. He preached the good news all around the Decapolis, the area of those 10 cities. He was so relieved and so thankful that he wanted to go out and tell everybody what had happened. So what do we learn from this chapter? As I said, I wrestled with this. Connie and I talked about it for a couple of hours last night. And, I never could find one thing that was common among all of these, except that they were all done by Jesus. So I thought what might be a good exercise for us is for us to think of some of the things about each of these people and what we've learned from this section. For instance, which one do I have first? The leper. What do we learn about the leper? Yes? Even with a little faith, Jesus will heal us. Okay? What else do we learn about the leper? He was willing to break the law to come to God. Good. Okay, what about the centurion? He recognized authority in the fact that Jesus had authority over the physical and spiritual world. Good. Good. Yes. Yes. This powerful soldier of high position who probably was not in the habit of humbling himself before anybody, um, was willing to humble himself before Jesus. Very good. His faith in Jesus was very strong. So strong that he believed that Jesus could heal remotely without Wi-Fi. Okay, what do we learn about Peter's mother-in-law? She had a servant's heart. Very good. Yes. As soon as she was healed, she served. And what about the Gadarene demoniac? What do we learn about him? He didn't give up his faith. And what did he do with his faith? He used it. He served in a different way, like Peter's mother-in-law. He went out and preached the word. As I said before, this is Thanksgiving week, and we need to really, this year, more than ever before, focus on what we are thankful for. Now, if none of you even thinks about God's blessing on us for this building, shame on you. He has really blessed us. He's provided a couple of different places for us to meet. And soon, in the next couple of months, he's going to provide another place for us to meet. Um, but there are other blessings, personal blessings in each of our lives. Um, whether it might be family or children or neighbors or whatever. We have a lot to be thankful for. Let's count our blessings. No, I'm not going to sing the song. Name them one by one. Let's count our blessings this year. Let's humble ourselves before God. Let's fall at his feet. Thank him for his goodness to us. I mean, homes and cars and clothes and friends. We have so many blessings. Redemption, salvation. Yes. Forgiveness. All right, well, let's be especially thankful this year. And let's close in prayer.